Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, On Screen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Everybody, and welcome to On Screen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we are going to be talking about Saturday Night, which is the movie about the making of the first episode of Saturday Night Live. That's going to be our full spoilers discussion, but we've also got our On the Horizon segment, and we've got our On Beat segment where we're going to go over 3 big news stories, ranging in size news stories, and then also 3 trailers that we're going to be talking about from this week. But let's kick things off with our On the Horizon segment. On the Horizon. On the Horizon. On the Horizon is where we talk about what's coming up in the next week or so, and we're going to be starting things off with The Witcher, Sirens of the Deep, which is coming on Tuesday, February 11th on Netflix. This is the animated Witcher movie, the second animated Witcher movie. This is the one that's got the original voice actor from the games doing Geralt of Rivia.
Yeah, which is cool. I like that.
And then we've got Cobra Kai returning for its final part of its final season, because Netflix did that whole dividing its final season into 3 parts, but the final part is coming out on Thursday, February 13th on Netflix. So that's good news. You haven't watched any of this season yet. You wanted to hold off, and now you're going to get a chance to watch it all. You got 15 episodes or something to go through. And we're going to talk about that at a later date. Next up, Yellowjackets is returning on Showtime on Friday, February 14th. The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak 2 is coming out on Friday, February 14th to PC, PS4, PS5, and Switch. And Captain America Brave New World hits theaters on Friday, February 14th as well. So yeah, that is what's coming up in the next week or so, from Witcher to Captain America. Now we're going to move on to our news segment on Beat. On Beat. As I said, On Beat is our news segment, and our first story is that Matthew Lillard will be reprising his role as Stu in Scream 7. So his character thought dead, but not confirmed dead, right?
I mean, he was pretty dead, let's be honest.
He was in bad shape, but he wasn't confirmed dead.
He got TV dropped on his head, and he didn't get up, so it's movies, anything can happen, right? But what's interesting about this announcement is...
He's coming back as StuBot 2000.
What's interesting about this announcement, though, is this announcement follows another previously thought dead Ghostface killer, Scott Foley, who was the killer in Scream 3, who is also announced to be in Scream 7. This falls on the heels of that announcement.
Mm-hmm. And Skeet Ulrich is also supposed to be in this one, and he was in the last one, too, I believe.
Yeah, but as more like a vision for a character who's not even going to be in this movie, so I have no clue. Hey, it's going to be the real Skeet Ulrich this time. I don't know what they're going with. So it seems like they're bringing back past killers in this movie. Seems to be what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Probably another type of vision or something.
I have no idea. No clue. Gonna be interesting. Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera are not returning for this one.
But Neve Campbell is?
Neve Campbell is. 2 of the cast, from the main cast of the last 2 Scream movies are returning. I don't have their names at the moment.
It doesn't matter though, but yeah, that's, it's just interesting because Matthew Lillard's the very first Scream movie, and he's gonna be back now. He's been kind of an ambassador for Scream too, he's done a lot of interviews and he's talked about stuff. He had a weird cameo in Scream 2 where he's kinda out of focus. He's kinda been a real, spokesman for the franchise.
Matthew Lillard, to me, always seemed like a chill guy. He just loves the stuff he does.
Well, he's Shaggy, and Shaggy's the ultimate chill guy.
Yeah, and Matthew Lillard, loves doing Shaggy. He loves being Shaggy.
Yeah.
He's the official voice of Shaggy in animation now. Every time they do an animated project, it's Matthew Lillard.
But yeah, so that is our first news story. Our second news story is another kind of reprise, another return, and that is that there is a Buffy the Vampire Slayer reboot that's in development. It is not official yet, but it is nearing an order at Hulu. Sarah Michelle Gellar is in final talks to both star and produce the series. She's going to reprise her role.
Interesting, because I remember when the series was active, even after the series ended, she was famously did not want to be associated with, she wouldn't show up at conventions for that when other stars would,
that could be related to things that were happening on set.
Yeah. She didn't really talk much about Buffy after the fact. She always came off to the fan base as being kind of detached from the fan base from Buffy.
We learned a few things more recently, though, that might have put some perspective on that.
Apparently things behind the scenes were pretty awful. But it seems like recently she's been more enthusiastic about it.
She also kind of retired from acting in general, for the most part, for a while, to kind of just be a mom. And it seems like, her kids are growing enough that she's kind of getting back into it recently, so.
Yeah, she's in the new Dexter prequel, and now she's going to be in this. And I think they've been trying to get some sort of Buffy sequel, reboot, or something going for a while now. We're in the age of IP where these corporations, they're trying to resurrect and mine every single valuable or semi-valuable IP, a recognizable name brand they have hanging around in their closets. So it was only a matter of time before the series got resurrected, right? It was only a matter of time before they did it. I think getting Sarah Michelle Gellar involved was probably the linchpin in getting the pilot order. I think that was the missing piece of the puzzle, was getting her involved. I think that's what got the green light.
So, it's not officially greenlit yet.
It's nearing a pilot.
Nearing an order. It's very close. Order. It's probably going to happen.
Right, the closest it's been, right?
Yeah. Some other people involved, Nora and Lila Zuckerman, who
they're going to be the showrunners.
Yeah, they're writing and running it. It's they wrote Poker Face. They ran that show, and they also were writers on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes.
But there's also a bunch of producers that were heavily involved in both Buffy and Angel.
Yeah, I don't
Writer-producers, I should say. So not just they were writers on Buffy that also became producers.
I don't know.
Gail Berman and Fran and Kaz Kazui. Fran ran, I think the final 2 seasons of Angel or something.
Oh, okay.
If I remember correctly. And Dolly Parton.
Yeah, Dolly Parton, who has, nothing to do with it except, her producing company. She was supportive, obviously, but, nothing to do with the creative.
She's just one of those, she's one of those figures that pops up
It's one of those things.
She's a producer on Buffy, and she was she helped fund the Moderna vaccine.
It's the same, it's the same level of trivia when you realize Lucille Ball produced Star Trek.
Yeah. It's it's just kind of funny though, because it's she also helped fund the Moderna vaccine.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Her name just pops up in weird and interesting places,
It sure does.
The last name attached to this is Chloe Zhao, is attached to direct the pilot. And she directed the Eternals movie for Marvel, but she also did Nomadland, which was a Oscar winner.
Mm-hmm.
So,
watch it.
I haven't seen Nomadland either, but that's what got her the Eternals job, apparently. And she did Eternals, and that was one of the lesser liked Marvel movies, but, I think the issue of Eternals had more to do with that they were trying to pack too much into a small thing, there should have been a series before Eternals,
I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like you could do this, and it could be fantastic, but I feel like there's also a million directions they could go that are just lame and awful. I think getting Sarah Michelle Gellar back, I think the idea is, her character's going to take on more of, the Giles role, and she's going to be a mentor to a new Slayer. I think that's perfectly fine as a base concept. But, when I look at, the names from, the previous show series that I'm looking for that would give me some comfort, I'm looking for, the bevy of writers that were on the previous shows who, I think are the ones who made the shows great. I'm looking for Stephen S. DeKnight, Jane Epinson, especially Jane Epinson, David Fury, Drew Goddard, Drew Greenberg.
They're too big. They're too big to not be involved in lead positions,
Right.
They're all, doing movies and shit now,
Yeah. They've all moved on to like bigger, better things. But man, it's kind of crazy to think like that was a talented writer's room.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, among them is like Gail Berman and Fran and Kaz Kazui, who were they were all writers in the room too. They were writers too on the original series.
Yeah. I mean,
they're producers on this, but they were writers on the original.
Well, I mean, we'll have to see. I don't know. I have mixed feelings because I kind of like I've seen like concepts before and everything like I've seen previously just sounded outright terrible.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got into my head like, oh, if they do a modern Buffy, it's just going to be awful. It's going to be like full of modern teen drama cliches.
Yeah, but those cliches were invented by Buffy.
It's gonna be like that Charmed reboot. Charmed itself wasn't that great to begin with, but man, that reboot stunk.
I brought this up with like other people though. It's like those cliches that everybody hates now, like those were basically invented by Buffy.
Yes, but they were done like with a sense of like self-awareness. They were done with a sense of self-awareness and irony and wit that the other stuff, like cribbing it from it, like did not have. That like did it straight.
But
it's kind of like,
Here's what I'll say though, which is that I think the biggest problem that something like this faces isn't even going to be the execution of the show, of whether it's done well or not, whether the writing's good or not. The showrunners did, they worked on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I'm not
a good Buffy-ish type show. Hold on.
I'm not bagging on the showrunners.
Hold on. I'm just saying, they also did Poker Face, which was very good.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest issue isn't even going to have to do with whether or not they can pull it off and do a good job or not. I think the biggest issue is going to be when Buffy was new, these things that you're talking about, these cliches, they weren't cliches yet. They were new. This was like a new way for characters to talk. This was like a new way for people to interact that hadn't been done before. And so like you could do something that's completely faithful and extremely well written. And it's like as if Buffy just picked up from where it left off and has been a great continuation, and it might still suck in a lot of people's minds because so much has happened between that point and now.
One of my biggest complaints right now is like Whedon dialogue, and not just like the way people complain about like Whedon dialogue or like you see it everywhere. It's the fact that like it's kind of a problem when the show became so iconic. It's the fact that like the way the characters talked in the show was not like realistic. It wasn't like anybody talked like I was in high school during the time the show was running. Nobody talked like these kids in my high school.
Yeah. But even that old version.
Like nobody talked like that in real life. But like it worked for the show because like it was like that, and I think it became so popular that it got like copied and ripped on so much. Everybody started trying to do like this witty Whedon style dialogue in their shows. A lot of times it's just done like really badly, and I think it kind of gets mashed up and confused with, oh, well, that dialogue style like is terrible. It's awful. It's like, well, it's awful if it's done poorly. Yes, I mean like it's been copied and bitten off like so much. If you go back to the original show and you watch these characters talk, it makes sense for the show. It's like it's snappy, it's witty, it's got
a rhythm to it.
A rhythm to it. But then there's like a whole bunch of other stuff where they're trying to have their characters talk like that, and they just sound like they're making lame jokes, or they're just trying to be witty. It's not coming across as witty. It's coming across as like, oh, a writer thought this was great. That's the difference, and I think that just gets confused for like, oh yeah, all that dialogue style is bad. And Buffy has been so influential that like people have tried to copy its tropes, borrow from it, and I think there's been like varying degrees of success in doing that, and I think like the bad stuff gets kind of like confused for like the real thing in the culture.
Well, you get the bad stuff, you have like Charmed, both the reboot and the original are garbage.
Yeah, Charmed was like a very obvious attempt to like just duplicate.
If you want like a good example though, you have stuff like Supernatural.
Yes.
The Magicians.
Yes.
Those are both really great examples of that. And I see people attack the Magicians for those same reasons, but I think it worked in the Magicians.
I thought it worked too, in the Magicians. Like, it's all about execution. I do think like they do have a decent talent.
It's about era too, though. Like I think they're in a weird situation because I think no matter what, half of the Buffy fandom is going to hate this.
Yeah, no,
like,
I agree.
I think if they say, okay, we can't do what the old Buffy did because what the old Buffy did was be new. And so we also have to be new. And if they manage to pull that off and do something new and interesting that kind of changes and breaks the dynamic in the same way that the original series did, but like in a new way, if they manage to pull that off, fans that just want that snappy, witty style of the old Buffy are going to be pissed because it's not Buffy. But if they don't do that, if they say, we're just going to continue it like this is Buffy season 8, we're just going to go right in like this is Buffy season 8, it's just going to like be, it's like it's directly continuing, it's going to have the exact same style and everything, but it's like, you know, new, it's like further ahead and stuff. Then the people that loved Buffy for being so groundbreaking are going to hate it because it's not groundbreaking. It's just repeating what's happened already and that so many people have already ate and copied, you know? So I think that's like, I think more than how well it's executed as far as just the quality of the show, the bigger issue that they're going to be facing is how they can get people on board when they're going to be basically half of the audience wants it one way and half of the audience wants it another way.
Yeah, that's a real dilemma.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like I said, it's a tough needle to thread because I think a lot of like these elements they're so you have to get it just right to make it work. And that involves like just a lot of work, a lot of talent to do it. You know, I just don't know, like, what the response is going to be like. I just kind of think a lot of these sequel reboots lately have been kind of throwaway. I'm thinking about stuff like...
There have been some great ones, too, though.
Girl Meets World. I'm thinking about that 90s show, which I guess was fine, but I'd never heard anybody, like, raving
It was
about
okay. It was fun, but it wasn't as iconic or interesting. I think it felt too...
Like,
I think I mentioned to you...
Fuller House...
I think I mentioned to you with that 90s show that it still kind of felt like that 70s show, like instead of...
Yes.
Like it takes place in the 90s now, but it still feels somewhat like it takes place in the 70s, you know?
Yeah. Strange.
I think it's a tough situation, but one thing I want to bring up that I think is very important, I think a lot of people just kind of they forget about this or they get in their heads so much that they ignore this. The original still exists. It's not going anywhere. And if this sucks, if this is like the worst thing ever, you can just not watch it and watch the original again. And the original is still there and it isn't hindered or hurt by this in any way. It's still...
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know?
People saying it's tainted or like, you know, you ruined my childhood or whatever. It's like, give me a break. I mean, it's not going to stop me from criticizing this.
The first Super Mario Brothers movie was horrible. And guess what? The game series was still great. The game series was still full of joy.
The game
and
still
fun.
existed. I mean, it's not going to stop me from criticizing this, but I'm not going to pretend Buffy is like ruined I can't go back and watch the old series.
Yeah. I mean, you can go back and watch the old Indiana Jones movies. You don't have to watch like Shia LaDouche, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's kind of say like, oh, it's ruined now. It's a kind of an extreme reaction. You can just pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point I want to bring up because I think a lot of people, they get so caught up in their heads about it that they don't just consider that they can just pretend it doesn't exist and go back and rewatch old episodes and enjoy them.
Exactly.
I do that. I might do that with Dexter. I might do a Dexter rewatch where I just rewatch like the first season. And then just pretend the rest doesn't exist. I don't know,
but season 4 with John Lithgow is
season 4 was good. Season 2 and 3
John Lithgow
were okay.
was like such a great villain. Yeah, season 2 and 3 were all right, but John Lithgow was such a great villain in season 4.
Yeah,
I thought, and it did like end on like a pretty emotionally devastating note for Dexter. So I thought like they did that really well, and then it just nosedived from there.
By the way, there's two connections to what we're talking about with Dexter here, because as you mentioned earlier, Sarah Michelle Gellar is in the new Dexter series, the prequel that's airing right now. But also,
they're doing a Dexter sequel, the sequel to the sequel.
Well, no, I wasn't even going to say that. I was going to say also the other Buffy connection is that emotional ending that you're talking about with season 4 was the death of Darla.
Yeah. Yeah, because like Dexter's girlfriend Rita was played by actress who played Darla in Buffy. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's kind of two little connections there. That's interesting. But yeah, so that's the Buffy the Vampire Slayer reboot news. Now we're going to go to the Nintendo financials. So they do this every quarter. They release their numbers and everyone scrapes through them like crazy looking for hints at stuff to come in the future. There isn't too terribly much in that regard, but there are some milestones that we want to go over from the Nintendo financials, which is right now, Switch has now sold 150.86 million units. And they say 129 million active Switches, which means that these are Switches that have been turned on and played a game in the last year. So,
which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's a big number for that. That's a big retention number for 8 years into a system.
Oh yeah, the fact that it's 150 million and only 20 million of those haven't used their Switch in the past year.
I think some people see a number like 150 million and they think like, oh, probably like 3/4 of that is like people who have replaced their system with an OLED or a light or something like that. Or something.
I'm gonna say like,
and this kind of disproves that flat out.
I'm gonna say like I probably like am in both numbers. I have a Switch I play all the time. That's in like the 130 million that have been played the last year. And then I have my launch Switch, which I haven't turned on for a while. That's probably in that 20 million or so Switches that have been purchased and haven't been turned on last year.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, yep, okay.
Yeah. You've upgraded. I haven't.
Yeah, I've upgraded. Yeah, exactly.
I've been having problems with my Switch. I've been waiting for the Switch 2 because my Switch has got it gets that like loud, like grinding, buzzing sound every so often, and it makes my like teeth cringe because I'm like, just hold on for another couple months.
Yeah, just hold out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just please hold out. You can. I'm positive we're getting the launch in June. So if we can hold out till then.
Yeah. June's the big rumor. There's also some people saying maybe late May might also make sense. That's all kind of the same thing though, if you think about it. I mean, just because it's in a different month, it's in the same time frame.
Yeah, it's the same time frame to me. That doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah.
I think I'm predicting the latest will be July. I don't think we're going to go into like late summer because I think the marketing is very intentional. It's very intentional to have the trailer reveal in January and then like the blowout with the games and stuff in April.
The other thing is about June being such a good time is that E3 was basically around June every year.
Yes.
And it was like people thought of that as like video game Christmas every year. And E3's like dead now. And all the Summer Game Fest and other things that have kind of replaced it really just don't hold up the same way E3 did. It doesn't have that same excitement. So Nintendo bringing back excitement to June for video games.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Launching a new console. I mean, it's not unprecedented. I believe they launched the GBA in June of 2001.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I think Nintendo consoles have almost always launched in November except for the Switch.
Yes.
And the Switch broke that by launching in March, but handhelds have launched like all over the damn place.
And I think June for Switch 2 is literally just because Nintendo wants to make sure that they have enough stock for launch. They don't want to end up in a launch situation where like...
Well, they've been talking about that. They were worried about scalpers.
It's been bought up by scalpers and nobody can get one.
Yeah.
So that I think like they're just holding out for...
The best way to combat scalpers is just to have so many units that
they're just holding out the launch for a few months so that they can have ample stock to launch with. And I think that makes sense.
We should say we talked about the unit sales being 150.86 million units total for the Switch. The DS is sitting at 154 million. The PS2, the revised numbers is at 160 million. They just put those out just we found another 5 million sales
under the couch.
Yeah.
Which is funny.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Trump called and said, we just need their 5 million units.
I don't know if Switch is going to end up beating 160 million units, if they're going to get 10 million more units out of it.
They'll probably pass the DS, because again, we should also point out these numbers are through December. So these numbers are being reported now, but they're from December, which means the numbers are higher now than what we're talking about.
Yeah, so they're on track to pass the DS for Switch to officially become Nintendo's best-selling system.
And they'll probably pass the old PS2 numbers before Sony conveniently found those additional 5 million units.
Right. Oh, yeah. Probably will.
They could pass the 160. It all depends on what their Switch plans are post-Switch 2 launch.
Yeah, they still got big games coming out for Switch this year. They still got, there's a brand new mainline Pokemon game people are hyped for. There's Metroid Prime 4. There's some heavy hitters coming.
And there's things they can do outside of that. Like, they could just say, you know what, we're going to drop the price of the OG Switch, and we're going to, like, focus on more casual experiences that can also be played on Switch too, because it's backwards compatible.
Yeah.
And so we're going to put out lots of, like, you know, more of the casual type stuff, you know, and kind of remarket it.
Furukawa, like, actually said in the investor Q&A, which is currently only in Japanese. I don't think they released it in English yet, but there's been some translations. He said they're going to keep supporting Switch 1 as long as, you know, it makes sense to support it. You know, as long as people are buying Switches, and they're going to keep making games for it, he said. So it's like,
Yeah. I mean, and it makes more sense with Switch to do that than it did with, like, say, 3DS that they kept around for a bit too long, I think.
Yeah.
And the reason why it makes more sense with 3DS is that you can play those Switch games on the Switch too.
Yeah, there's backwards compatibility. I don't think there's, like, the drop-off in interest. People had, like, lost interest in the 3DS by the time Switch came out.
This is like a first for Nintendo with the Switch, where, like, they're 8 years in and people haven't completely lost interest in the system. Like, that was like the Nintendo cycle. If you were a Nintendo fan, you know the pain of, like, that final year of a Nintendo system where it's just like, it's just dead.
Where it's like, it's a desert.
Yeah. And this is, like, completely bucking that trend, so.
And you're kind of, like, obsessing over, like, any, like, news tidbit of the next console and the games, mainly because you want Nintendo games to play again.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But there's still some big stuff coming out, you know? I mean, there's, like, the port of Xenoblade Chronicles X, and there's, you know, Metroid Prime 4 is a huge game, you know?
Yeah, it's a huge game. Like, it's, you know, new mainline Pokemon game. Like, I don't, you know, they're going to get some, arguably, there's bigger games coming out for Switch this year than there was last year.
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of
I mean,
crazy.
the biggest game that came out last year was probably, Echoes of Wisdom?
Echoes of Wisdom, Mario and Luigi Brothership, where I think were the biggest games.
Yeah, and Metroid Prime 4 is, like, bigger than both of those combined. Maybe not in sales. Maybe not in sales, but...
Maybe not in sales, yeah.
In attention.
In attention. Oh, yeah. Because, like, it's a big AAA game from Nintendo, you know, in a popular franchise. People have been waiting ages for Metroid Prime 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Switch still has life in it. And that's the kind of thing I like to see, too, to be honest, because, like, it really, like, when you buy your console, it kind of validates your purchase, right? That, you know, like, you're going to get supported, and people have been supported with Switch for a long time, but, like, you're not going to be immediately, like, forgotten about, like, when the new thing comes out.
I've heard people rail against, like, pre-ordering games and stuff by saying you should never do that, you should just invest in what you want to get, or never invest on the promise. But I'm like, that's what consoles always were, is investing in a promise.
Oh, yeah.
Because
if you buy them at launch,
you wouldn't pay $300 to get a system for the games that come out at launch alone.
No.
You're getting it because you know that as the years go by, you're going to keep getting more games, you know?
Yeah, and hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, if you bought the Wii U, you might be disappointed in that promise. But, yeah, it's like, yeah, hopefully you would get, like, a steady stream of games for that system as the years go on.
Yeah. I mean, it's the promise. That's why you buy a system. That's why you don't just wait until all the games are out and then buy it and the games you want. You know, you buy it because you know, like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll have at least a few years. Even if it's a kind of a failure, I should have at least a few years, unless it's like the Virtual Boy. Like, even Wii U had enough games, I think, to justify the purchase.
Oh yeah.
But by the end,
I love the Wii U from a library standpoint. I thought the Wii U had a real solid first party lineup.
I think the one example where they really didn't live up was like the Virtual Boy.
Yeah, the Virtual Boy. That was on the market like so short. Only a handful of games. I do think like they are a solid handful of games. Probably not S tier, but like definitely solid B tier. I mean, Wario Land is like an A tier game, but like other games, like I've enjoyed Red Alarm, I've enjoyed Telro Boxer,
and now it's like a fun novelty. Like if you can find
novelty.
One now, it's kind of a cool thing, a cool piece of history, you know?
Oh yeah. I've actually owned Virtual Boy twice. I got one when it came out, and then I lost it, and I got one a little later to replace the one I lost, and I've since lost that one. But like, I've actually owned a copy of Wario Land. for Virtual Boy, it's a fun little platformer. I have like this weird soft spot for it because like awful, terrible, god awful hardware. Absolutely, it's uncomfortable to use, but I find the games to be like fun and interesting.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's an interesting novelty.
Yes.
Some other numbers and things to go over. There were 19 million sellers in the last quarter, 7 from third parties, 12 from first parties. This brings up the number of first party million sellers, meaning these are games that have sold more than 1 million units on the Switch, to 72, which is, as you said to me, that's the biggest ever.
Yes. Yeah, it's the most first party million sellers of any console ever.
Which makes sense, because if you think about it, when it comes to systems or companies that support their systems with first-party software, Nintendo's at the very top. You know, they get less third-party support traditionally, but they have more first-party support than the other companies do, typically. And this is also by far Nintendo's longest-lasting system in the market. It's been 8 years. So it's still going, and so it makes sense. Yeah, it should be in that position. But that's an interesting figure. Unfortunately, the hardware sales are down 30.6%, and software sales are down 14.4%. That makes sense because it's the final year of the console, things are ramping down. But it's also kind of hindered even more by the fact that the forecast was cut by 7%, and that's down 31.2% year over year.
Yeah,
that means that Nintendo expected to sell more than they did. Not just that they're ramping down year over year, but that they expected to sell more.
Nintendo was like a bit over
optimistic. Yeah.
I think maybe they felt like their lineup for the Switch this year was stronger than it actually ended up being. You know, like they probably overestimated the impact that Zelda would have or that Mario and Luigi would have.
Mm-hmm.
When really, like, for some reason they didn't connect. I guess, like, the media, like, does not seem to care about 2D Zelda that much. You know, like, I hear all kinds of complaints that, like, Switch had, like, a bad year software-wise. I'm like, I guess. I don't know. It had Zelda. But, like...
So, that brings us to our numbers for new games that have broken into that million sellers club, and that includes Super Mario Party Jamboree, which has sold 5.6 million units. This makes it the fastest selling Mario Party.
That came out in October.
Yeah.
I should point out that's not an older game. That is a brand new game.
And that's October numbers going through December, because these numbers cut off at
For
December.
a game to sell like 5 million in that short time span is kind of insane.
Yeah.
A lot of games do not do that.
This is the fastest selling Mario Party ever.
Yes.
Which
is kind of crazy for, like, it's the third Mario Party on Switch, so that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, which we brought up, that's the 2D Zelda game that came out last year, has sold 3.91 million units. That came out, I think, in September, was it? Or
that came out September, yeah. So it was September for Zelda, October for Mario Party, and Mario and Luigi was November.
Mario Luigi Brothership sold 1.4 million. So they're all million sellers. They're not like crazy sellers, you know, that are going to go on for years and years selling additional millions of units and stuff. But that's still good. That's still very good.
Yeah, that's still good. That's really good for Mario and Luigi, too, because I think that's like the best selling Mario and Luigi game.
Yeah.
And that was
1.4 doesn't sound like it's huge, but like I remember in the Wii era, there were some games, some more like niche games that I was like, oh, these games actually did pretty well for their budget and stuff, and they sold like less than 1 million units.
People gotta realize, people say that, you might think it is a lot. Most games do not,
I mean, it wouldn't be a lot if it was GTA 6 that sold that because of the budget.
I know that.
But that's all relative.
Most games, the majority of games, struggle to sell 1 million copies.
Yeah.
You know, like, people don't realize that. Most of the games that come out in a given year, like, do not reach 1 million copies sold.
Mm-hmm. The last piece of news, the last thing is, it's not even a hard number for the milestone, but Mario Kart 8 sold like another about 5 million units. The game that just will not stop fucking selling. It's been out for like almost 8 years now.
And this is why Mario Kart 9 is the first Switch 2 game we got to see.
Yeah.
This is why Switch 2 is launching with Mario Kart 9, guaranteed.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says, like, that is a day one game.
If it isn't, then that's crazy.
Yeah, that's insane.
But yeah, I mean, it's Mario Kart 8, man. Jesus Christ. It's insane how much that has sold, you know, like it's insane when you look at how much the Switch has sold. And then you can say that a game on the Switch has more than a 33% attach rate.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah. I mean, 1 in 3 people who own a Switch have a copy of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which itself is a port. It's not even the original game.
It's basically in the GTA territory because, like, GTA sells so much because, like, there was a point where, like, everybody buying a PlayStation or buying an Xbox for the first time defaulted to, like, GTA being, like, the game they bought with it.
Yeah. And now, like with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe being on 2 systems, you can look at something like GTA 5, which has been on, GTA 5 has been on 3 generations of systems.
Yeah. Mario Kart 8's been on 2 generations of systems. I don't think Nintendo's counting its Wii U sales, but if you add Wii U sales, like that's still sold 8 million on Wii U, which is far away the best selling Wii U game.
That's like again, probably about a third of a 33% attach rate or more, you know?
Yeah.
Cause the Wii U only sold like, I think 20 something million. So that's crazy. That would be good numbers on any system. And to be that good on the Wii U is particularly impressive. But that is our discussion of the Nintendo financials. And now we're going to move on to trailers. We got 3 trailers we're going to talk about that came out this week. We're going to start things off with Ash. So this is, of course, the movie that's following Ash Williams from Evil Dead. No, it's not that.
Ash Williams teaming up with Ash Ketchum.
Yeah. I forgot. This is the Pokemon movie. No. Oh, you know what this is? It's actually Archaic Sealed Heat, which is that Mistwalker game that came to, I think it was DS.
To DS, but only in Japan.
Yeah, there you go. That's what this is. No, this is a new sci-fi horror movie, very like Alien vibes to it, which is kind of funny since Alien kind of came back with Romulus like last year. But it's very much got that kind of like Alien vibe to it, but it's this new movie. It's got Jesse Pinkman in it. It just looks like crazy alien psychological sci-fi horror.
Yeah,
really, like I said, real alien vibes.
Yeah, real alien vibes, but really leaning into like the psychological horror element of it. Like you can't like trust what's going on, you know, like the main character can't trust what's going on, and you, the audience, can't trust what you're seeing.
Unreliable narrator.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that looks interesting. That looks like it's gonna be a good time.
Mm-hmm. Looks pretty gorgeous too. Like I love the.
Oh yeah, the visuals are like
colors
amazing.
have come back in the movies.
Yes. Colors need to come
Everything
back.
was going into desaturation, and now we're getting like, there's a shot like at the beginning of this trailer where it's like there's a light flickering, and the flickering light is like green, and then when it goes out, everything's kind of like purple, and it's got that like color. I love colors in movies again. We had that era of desaturation, and now we're kind of out of that, so that's cool. The next trailer we got is for Jurassic World Rebirth. So, are you excited for Jurassic World Rebirth?
It looks good. Gareth Edwards is a good director. They're taking like a lot of inspiration from the original novels. There's a whole sequence from the first novel they did not include in Jurassic Park that they're going to be including in this movie, I heard. It looks much more like a movie than the last one. So, I mean, it looks good. It looks good. I was skeptical, but I think they're probably onto something with this one.
I don't know if I think even if this is good, I don't know if it's going to succeed because that franchise lost so much of its hype after the last movie.
I have no idea. I wasn't paying attention to the box office. I still felt like the last one did pretty well.
It did well, but there was a lot of negativity about it. So that's why I'm saying like I think the last movie did well off of the backs of the movies that came before it. And now this movie might be hurt because of the movie that came before it, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
It's kind of like, it makes me think of...
It's kind of stacked. It's launching in July against Fantastic Four and Superman, you know? It's gonna be like a pretty stacked July movie-wise this year.
I think what this reminds me of is the Schumacher Batman movies. So the first Schumacher Batman movies, what was that? Batman Forever, right? That did very well. It made a lot of money at the box office. And then Batman and Robin flopped. And some people are like, oh, what happened? It's like, well, what happened with Batman and Robin also happened with Batman Forever. It's just that everybody still went to Batman Forever because of Batman and Batman Returns. So like Batman Forever came off of the backs of two beloved movies, so everybody went to it, realized how much they hated it, and then Batman and Robin came out and they weren't interested in watching it anymore. So it'll be interesting to see if this is going to be able to hold up on its own regard, because it looks a lot better than the last movie. I mean, we don't know. We haven't seen like reviews come out for it yet, you know, to say if it actually is better, you know, but it looks better than what the last movie was doing. But we don't know how that's going to translate as far as success goes, because sometimes a movie that isn't good does very well at the box office, not off of its own merits, but because it's in a franchise and people expected it to be good and then we're disappointed, you know?
Right, yeah.
So I'm interested how this is going to work with this, but yeah, it definitely looks a lot better than the last film, so hopefully it gets a fair shake. And the last trailer we're going to be talking about is for a little indie film that probably none of you guys have heard about, based on a property that's kind of obscure, you know, real esoteric, and that's the Fantastic Four First Steps. So what did you think of this little obscure film trailer?
I thought it looked great. I thought it looked great. Visually, it's on point. I love the style of it. They showed like everybody's powers except for like Mr. Fantastic's.
That's interesting. That was the only one they didn't show.
Yeah, it's interesting. And also, like, stretching powers are also the toughest to do in live action. That's got me kind of concerned.
Yeah.
But everybody else's powers look great. Thing looks great. It looks like the best Fantastic. It looks like an actual Fantastic Four movie. They had Galactus at the end.
Yeah.
It looked like Galactus. And people like think that's a stupid statement, but no, it's not.
You mean he wasn't a storm cloud?
Right, yeah, exactly. That's actually crazy. Like, this is probably like the most hype I've been for like a Marvel movie in a long time. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
This looks like the best Marvel movie in ages.
Yeah, I think what I really liked about this is two things. One is I love like the retrofuturism aesthetic. We knew about that going in, but seeing it on display is yes, I love this. I love this so much.
Stylistically, it is fantastic. It's amazing.
I saw somebody say that you see the cars outside and they look like they all drove off of the World's Fair from was it the first Captain America movie?
Right.
Where Tony Stark was showing the car of the future, you know? Like they look like they all just kind of drove off of there. Like they have this kind of almost like concept cars from like the 1960s look to them, you know? And that's like really cool. I love that aesthetic. The other thing that I really dig is just the tone. I think my favorite part of the entire trailer was when the Thing was trying the pasta.
Yes.
Cooked by the robot, and he was being very gentle to the robot. Like he was saying, I'm going to add a little bit of garlic. Not because it's not delicious, but just to give it a little bit of a kick.
Yeah,
you know?
Kirby, yeah.
Just that kind of like gentleness of his character and stuff on display, and the way that played into just that kind of, that tone. Like, I'm like, oh, that was so refreshing. Like, I'm like, I really like what they're going for tonally here, you know? They're not going gritty at all, you know?
Yeah, they're not going gritty at all. This isn't going to be like some cynical this is going to be like hopeful retro futurism adventure movie, you know? Like it looks excellent.
Yeah. Fan-fucking-tastic is what you were going to say.
There you go. Yes. Yes. I'm trying to avoid saying it because like I say it all the time. It's like, I'm not trying to make a pun. I'm trying to pun here. Yeah, I'm trying to stop myself and use other words.
Did you see the thing at the end of the trailer where it said presented in Fantastic Vision? Or
yes, I saw that. That was so cool.
I hope they actually do something for that. Like, obviously, they're not going to invent a new theater technology, but they should make like 3D glasses, but they're just transparent. They're just see-through.
we're going to be eating this July because like both that and Superman look amazing.
Yeah, and both of them are very hopeful.
Yes, they're both hopeful movies. They got that in common, so that's interesting.
Yeah, but that is it for our trailers, and now we're going to move on to our final segment, full spoilers. This week, we are talking about Saturday Night, which is the movie about the making of the first episode of Saturday Night Live, featuring a bunch of actors playing the not ready for primetime players that we know and love from the 70s, from the first era of Saturday Night Live. We're seeing them represented by all these different actors, which is kind of weird in some cases. It's kind of weird seeing Dan Aykroyd because I know who that actor is, and I'm just seeing that actor playing Dan Aykroyd. But then you see, like, Gilda Radner, and I'm like, I just saw her, and all I could think is, that's Gilda Radner.
Yeah. all the actors they did amazing impressions.
Yeah.
Like, that was Chevy Chase. That was
Yeah.
John Belushi. Like, I thought it was funny. They had, like, the same actor doing Andy Kaufman, and Jim Henson was the same person.
Yeah. Oh, man. Jim Henson was a great, like, through line through it. I think what this movie was interesting to me for was that it's kind of a fly on the wall movie.
Yeah.
You're kind of just seeing it's just chaos.
Yeah,
like,
it's just
the movie
like
jumps in
chaos,
and it's just pure chaos. But then by the end of the movie, things started to kind of come back together and kind of come under control. And they did like a pretty beautiful parallel where they had this guy that was like placing bricks.
Yes.
And he was doing it throughout the entire movie all by himself. And
nobody
then at the very end, everybody jumped in to help him. Like all the other, like the workers all jumped in to help him to get it done, And that was paralleled with the menu of sketches that was on display backstage. They kept showing like there was just too much stuff on there. Like how was it going to be organized? It was a source of stress. That was like Billy Crystal. Like we had an actor playing Billy Crystal in this, And that was his part was basically like his stuff was all cut basically. He wasn't able to get on the air with it and stuff. And it's like, it was all like him struggling to like, knowing that there wasn't going to be enough space, trying to get it on there, eventually not getting it on there. His alliance to stay with somebody else to be strong, falling apart, all of that. But all of that was set up for the eventual moment in which Lorne Michaels was able to pull everything together. And I think they paralleled that with the whole bricklaying thing.
Yes, yeah.
I thought that was kind of a
parallel.
It was a beautiful moment when that happened, I think. Because the tone of that movie was just utter chaos. It was almost hard to watch at times because it was just like,
the camera's like zooming, switching back and forth between people, like the way like the camera swoops constantly.
I watched this with my mom and my roommate who's here with me, and I remember looking over at them at like halfway through the movie and saying, "Can you imagine trying to work on this? Can you imagine being in like Lorne Michaels' position and just trying to make order out of this like absolute chaos, And they were both just like, oh God, no, like it just seems like an utter nightmare. It's like the idea of this just seems like horror. And then they're able to kind of pull it together at the end, and it had a few like little sweet moments in between. You had all that kind of like anti-establishment kind of pushes against like censorship and things that was going on, But you could also see how that was just adding to the chaos that Lorne Michaels was dealing with. And I think that's what this was really about, Like that's to me what it was about. Tell me what you thought about the movie and kind of what you really were drawn to or distracted by or like what stood out to you.
What stood out to me was just like the amazing performances, the way everybody like did a fantastic job just convincing me like you could tell me, oh, this was filmed with like the actual cast on the night, and like I believe it with the way these pressures. Like Chevy Chase was Chevy Chase, right?
Yeah.
Like that was Chevy Chase. That was like there's
an asshole.
Yes, yeah, I love the way like they portrayed like his ego in that. Like
God, and they did a cool thing with like the whole Milton Berle thing.
Yeah, I'm just bringing that up. Actually, J.K. Simmons as Milton Berle was like I was not expecting that, but that was great. And then that scene between Chevy Chase and Milton Berle was great because like you're kind of like not rooting for anybody that's they're both assholes.
Yeah. I love how Milton turned it into a literal dick measuring contest.
Yes. Oh my word.
They did a good job of nailing Chevy Chase on that, which, explains probably why he doesn't like the movie.
Oh, like you saw the story where Jason Reitman was screening it and Chevy Chase comes in with his wife. He watches the movie, and then after the movie's over, he walks up to Jason Reitman, pats him on the shoulder, and he told him, "You should be embarrassed."
Yeah, that's very Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase has not earned sympathy over the years,
No, no, he hasn't. Jason Reitman said, like, I got my own Chevy Chase moment now.
Yeah. It's funny, like, they had the fight between him and Belushi.
Yes.
That was apparently, in actuality, that happened somewhere in, like, the second season or something. And that was between Chevy Chase and Bill Murray.
Yes, because and it's funny, too, because it's funny, like, they did that in the movie here, because I was watching an old interview with Chevy Chase. He was on the Howard Stern show, and they were talking about, like, his feud with Bill Murray. And during the course of that short discussion, Chevy Chase was talking about like Bill Murray and their feud, and he said he was calling John Belushi like a brilliant comedic genius, that he was in awe of. He never said anything bad about John Belushi. I know it's just an interview, but
it doesn't go the other way.
Yeah. It doesn't go the other way, no.
John Belushi didn't have kind things to say about Chevy Chase. Yeah.
Right. A lot of people don't end up really having kind things to say about Chevy Chase.
Pretty much the entire cast of Saturday Night Live from that era had nothing kind to say about Chevy Chase.
Right.
They all pretty much hated him. He left Saturday Night Live halfway through the second season and kind of left everybody high and dry so he could go on his film career, and everybody hated him after that.
Oh yeah. That's why they brought in Bill Murray, was because Chevy Chase left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then when Chevy Chase came back to host, and that's when he got in it with Bill Murray. Which Bill Murray always came across to me as kind of a take no shit kind of guy.
Yeah, he's a I don't give a shit kind of guy. He literally doesn't have an agent, and he has a phone number that people can contact him on, but he, I guess, mostly leaves it off and doesn't pay attention to it. So funny. It's one of those things that when people when they were trying to cast him for Ant-Man or Ant-Man Quantumania, when he had that small role in that, they said that was insane, trying to reach him,
Trying to get him just to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's apparently very hard to reach. That totally makes sense with that. Yeah, it was interesting watching the movie, and sometimes they wouldn't even say who somebody is, and you just had to kind of intuit it by the performance and by the look that they were going by. That was a perfect example. Billy Crystal was an example of that, where I think they said Billy, but they never said his full name,
Yeah, but you could tell
you could tell by the way he looked, yeah.
But by the way he looked, by the way he talked, Billy Crystal has a very distinct voice, a very distinct way of talking.
Yeah.
The way he enunciates and stuff, you could tell.
But that's what I mean, that, it's interesting that they could do that with so many people, where you could see somebody and you're I think that's so-and-so, just by the way they look or the way they're presenting themselves. I mean, John Belushi popped out the second he was on frame. Before they mentioned him, you just saw him in the background of a shot and it's oh fuck, that's John Belushi,
Yeah, exactly. There are times where they set it, but a lot of times, if you're familiar with a lot of the stars from the 70s and 80s, especially the 80s, you could pick up on these impressions pretty easily. They had George Carlin. George Carlin hosted the first episode,
Oh, that was great. And Matthew Rhys did such a good job.
Yeah, he did such a fantastic job.
He's not really known as a comic actor either, but Matthew Rhys is great. I love Matthew Rhys. The fact that I saw him, I recognized it was Matthew Rhys, and then I forgot it and just saw him as George Carlin as the movie went on.
Yeah,
is impressive, because I'm somebody who's seen a lot of stuff with Matthew Rhys in it. I know who that actor is, I'm very well versed in Matthew Rhys. So to have somebody that you're that well versed in, and then you forget it's them through the course of the movie because they're so playing another person, a real figure that is impressive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the ones that impressed me the most though were Gilda Radner and Jane Curtin.
Yeah, Jane Curtin. Yeah.
Oh my God! It was Jesus Christ, that's them. Andy Kaufman, that was crazy. They even redid the whole Mighty Mouse routine.
Yeah, having the Mighty Mouse Andy Kaufman routine in there was a funny inclusion.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah.
I like what they did with the censor lady, the way they gave it a clear villain, because you couldn't do that with, the executive, Willem Dafoe's character. You couldn't really do that because he wasn't really standing in opposition. He was kind of both antagonistic and not. He was helpful and antagonistic at the same time. And then you'd have somebody like Johnny Carson called up, was clearly a villain, but he was just over the phone.
Well, the whole
Burl was clearly a villain, but they paired him up against Chevy Chase, who's also an asshole,
Right, yeah.
But the only clear villain was the censor.
I like they had Finn Wolfhard playing an NBC page.
Yeah, that was it's weird seeing him play a very adult role,
Yeah, right.
I mean, we've seen him grow up. We've seen him just that same age, basically.
Yeah,
but, it's weird, because they're still playing him younger, and then here
I like they got Finn Wolfhard, and, his role is, your random NBC page.
Yeah. Basically just at the beginning and end of the movie, and that's it.
Yeah. He's not playing anybody famous. He's not doing an impression.
Yeah.
You just get to be a page. Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things. Yeah, that was pretty funny. The whole conceit of the film was basically the idea that NBC was having a contract dispute with Johnny Carson, because they wanted to keep Johnny Carson on the weekends, and he didn't want to do the Tonight Show on weekends. And so their idea was like, oh, they're going to threaten Johnny with like replacing him on the.
This is a very NBC tactic. They do this shit all the time. Like if I listen to like Conan's podcast and stuff, and they talked about like how he got the Tonight Show initially, and like how other people had auditioned for like the Tonight Show throughout the years, like when nobody was stepping down, but they spread a rumor that like somebody might be stepping down, and then they filmed like trial shows as like a pressure mechanism against, you know, for like contract disputes and shit.
Yeah, so the only reason they greenlit Saturday Night was they're going to threaten him like, oh, we got this new show that we're going to run, you know, like, and it's going to be more popular than you. You better you better just sign the contract, you know, like it was a pressure campaign against Johnny Carson to get Johnny Carson to do what they wanted. There was no intention for the network for this to like actually be successful. You know, it was kind of like this was meant to fail because this wasn't like a thing like the network was seriously invested in.
Yeah.
And so there's that pressure, you know?
Yeah. Oh man, this is a pretty fun movie. It was like I said, I really liked the way that it was just chaos that kind of came into order at the end. And I gotta give credit to Reitman on this, because that is like, I can't even imagine what the process of making this would be like. There's so many moving pieces. And they used a lot of like long tracking shots too, to kind of like play into the chaos. Like they did cuts. Like it wasn't like they did like a huge one-er.
There's like long tracking shots as people are moving down like the hallways and stuff, you know.
And it's switching from like one group of people to another, and it's just chaos everywhere. But it all makes sense and all fits. Like I just can't even imagine like how you would sit down to write this.
No, I can't.
You know, or how you would how you would plot out how you would storyboard this and plot this. Like it doesn't even make sense to me like how you would do that.
Oh yeah, I think Reitman said in an interview this was one of like the most difficult movies he's ever made, and I think just because technically like for like those reasons. Yeah,
it's just ridiculously complex, and you know it's quite an achievement.
Yep, I enjoyed it. Absolutely. Had a good time with it.
Yep. And that is it for our discussion. Next week, we are going to be talking about Gladiator 2, which is available on Paramount Plus for anybody that wants to watch that. But we're going to be talking about that. We've both seen Gladiator. We never talked about it on the show, but we'll be talking about Gladiator 2 next week. So stay tuned for that. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will on both of those platforms. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our website, thetotalscreen.com. If you go to our website and open up a container story for any of these podcast episodes, you'll find all of the relevant links to our YouTube channel, our SoundCloud page, our RSS feed, all that stuff is all there, so you can get it there. You can also subscribe to our podcast through your favorite podcast client of choice, like Apple Podcasts or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcasts, as well as additional content, is available on our YouTube channel, so check that out as well. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.